Okay, very good. Well, here we are to week 2 of our beginning sock class. And we're going to tonight talk about how we would decrease the toes. We're going to look at an example of the rounded Kitchener stitch. And then I'm also going to show you how I weave in my ends and kind of finish up my socks as well, and I've got my YouTube videos pulled up on screen. So hopefully that will be a little better sound. I'm sorry that our sound was kind of quiet last week. I hope, did any of you navigate to the YouTube and find the individual little? Yes. Okay. Very good. Because those are only a minute, 2 minutes, and you can watch it over and over again. I did get the gauge filmed. It was on my to-do list for about, a year. And it kept being on it for the last 7 days. So I just did it today, and it actually is up and ready to go. So you can review that as well. Let's hear how it went this week. Let's hear what questions you have, what things you might have encountered. I think sometimes when you have questions, it might be something that somebody else had too. So is there anything that came up for you this week that, well, let's talk about our wins. Let's talk about our wins. What was a win for you this week? What worked for you? Just kind of wave at me and then I'll call on you. If you've got a win that happened, a win means a good thing, it worked. Okay. All right. Yes, Leslie.
Okay. So I've got my heel turned and started up. I'm not quite all the way up to where the toe should be, but pretty close. And turning the heel, figuring out how to do it left-handed was a win-win-win, even though I had to throw the sock on the floor once and had to undo 2 whole rows and start over, but it was a win. So I love the fit is great. I tried it on, the fit is great. I really like that heel. So now that I know how to do it, what I had to do was I had to make like a swatch on big needles, just like a big swatch, so that I could see how the twin stitches actually worked, and then being able to transpose from right, like I had to take the little directions and go cross out right and right left, cross out left and right and right. Okay, but otherwise, I feel like it was a win. Okay,
that is a win. I tell you what, if you're doing it with right-handed directions, left-handed, and you only threw it on the floor once, I think that is a win. So thank you for sharing that. Who else had a win this week? And you know what? A win doesn't mean that you necessarily got your heel done. Maybe it's just that you figured out the magic loop. Last week we talked about no knit shaming, no sock knitting shaming. That everybody does this at their own pace, and that's what's good. Pat, what do you have to share?
Well, it worked for me as well. And you said just get to that point where you have the 2 stitches on either end and it'll make sense. And it did.
Oh, great.
So I have my heel and I'm ready to go. So I loved it.
Did you? Good.
Yes.
And Pat, you took our class when we did the afterthought heel. And so are you liking this heel so far? I mean,
much better. I can follow it. It makes sense. It worked. I've knit probably a dozen socks, but over a dozen years. So I like where you said keep knitting them. And now that I did it, I will.
Oh, right. Fabulous.
So good.
Pat's up in South Dakota. So see what's fabulous about all this is being able to come together. Great. Okay. Who else has a win you'd like to share? Yes. Let Kat.
I knitted about 7 inches and I couldn't get it on my foot. Yeah. So then I consulted with you and you gave me some advice and I ripped it all out, and now I've got my heel. I'm almost ready for my toe now and it fits fine. It fits perfect.
So what did you change to make that fit work then?
I used a larger needle, a number 1, and then I went to the larger sock size. I probably have bigger feet than I thought I did. So
that's all right. I'm glad that worked. And again, this is part of that process, is figuring it all out. And, I knit enough socks that I don't have to write anything down, but don't forget to take good notes. because as sure as you think you're going to remember this, you might not remember it, that you do like a 6.5 cuff, or you do like this or that. So I'm glad that that adjustment worked out, Kathy. Great.
Perfect.
Great. Yes, Dickie. Dee?
I had the same win, only when I tried to earn it was too big.
Mhm.
I had talked to you about the number of cast-ons,
Right.
and I went to a smaller number of cast-on, and it fits well.
Great. What did you end up with your number?
Whatever the middle size is, 60.
64.
Okay.
Great. Great. And what size needle are you doing it on?
An aught, as you recommended.
The 0?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Fabulous. Good job. Okay, who else? Okay, Karen.
New to socks and I'm struggling. I've ripped it out twice. I think I know where my mistakes were, but
Okay.
the videos, the tutorials help a lot.
Okay, good, Karen. Good. Good, good, good. Well, hang in there. You know, I've had people make 5 and 6 socks until they had, you know, there's always kind of a moment where we have a breakthrough. And that's what we talked about last week, is if you really would want to be a sock knitter, just to turn around and make them again. I'm working through the beginning crochet with Valerie, and you know, each time I do a new crochet thing, I get better at it. And it reminded me of my sock knitting and how it took me a while to really master it, where I could make it without looking, so to speak, and make it so that it fits. So thanks for sharing that you ripped it out a couple times. And, you know, Susan Feely, my sweater coach, always says, it's just yarn. You know, I think when we're knitting, we're like, oh my gosh, I've spent hours on this. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to rip it out, but
I think for a real beginner to have a larger yarn and a little larger needle would have been helpful.
mhm.
It's really difficult, you know, with these teeny tiny stitches.
Yes, they are. They are. They are. Yes, yes. Theron, what were you going to say? And then Dee will come to you.
Oh, I didn't mean to say anything, but it's not exactly a win, except that I'm almost to where my toe goes on. So I figure if I've stuck it out this long, it's a win. But I find that I'm getting some laddering, and that's just getting used. I've always been afraid to pull that hard.
Uh-huh.
And I think I'm finally getting that worked out, that I'm not afraid to give it a good tug and get it
Okay.
sucked in.
Okay, good, good, good. Anybody else have some laddering trouble this week? Any that you noticed along your sides? Brenda, you did?
Well, no, I didn't. But in the past I have. And what really helped, Angie, is you saying it's really not, I mean, for that first stitch when we turn, how far to tug it, but it's really the second stitch
Mhm,
that needs to be
mhm.
caught in there. So for the first time, I don't, which is really unusual.
Good, 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 good. You know, that too is just a little bit of a finesse and a little bit of the muscle memory, and that you get that. So you may have it for a little bit. I will tell you that sometimes I even get laddering still to this day, depending on if I'm tired when I'm knitting it, depending on, you know, I don't know, whatever factors. But if I steam my socks, that will help improve that a little bit. It won't completely take them away, but when you wash them, they'll kind of behave themselves a little better. Dee, what were you going to say?
I was relative to the size of the needle being easier. Having a high quality yarn
Mhm.
really makes it easier. Walmart yarn is just tough to work with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we agree with that, no doubt. And, you know, again, with all of our knitting, we spend a lot of time with it. So it might as well be something that you enjoy the feel, you enjoy, the product. And I think I said last week, I wear my socks all the time. I walked my dog for 20 minutes today and wore my knit socks, and they just wear and wear and wear and wear. So I don't wear anything else. All right. Anybody have anything that was more of a challenge for you this week, or something that you're curious about, or you thought, oh, dang, I wish I had asked that question? Anything you encountered maybe?
Just me again. On the instructions,
Mhm.
on the back side, it said slip one stitch. And when I looked at the twin stitches, I initially didn't know, because there's 2 loops on the
Uh-huh.
needle, if it should just be one of those or 2. But after going back through your videos, I noticed the twin stitch is to be treated as one.
That's correct. Good observation. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good observation. That would be a good thing to say, wouldn't it? That stitch is treated as one. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Susan, did you have a question?
Well, I was just going to say, I tore mine out because I didn't like the laddering,
Uh-huh.
and I hadn't gotten that feel for it when I realized I hadn't done the stitches,
Mhm.
left to right and right to left.
Mhm.
And it went so much better when I did it correctly.
Okay. All
Yeah, so
right.
I was pleased. I do have some laddering on one side of
Mhm.
my sock, but the other side is just fine. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well,
It's
again,
all right. I'm
as
not doing it out.
as
I want to
Brenda,
get one sock done.
right, as Brenda said, Brenda, you started knitting socks with me early on, 6 years ago, probably. And now you're hitting that stride. We're not going to say it's necessarily takes 6 years, because you put them down and picked them up, over a
Yeah.
course of a lot of time. So again, there is just always that moment where you have a breakthrough, but you can't have a breakthrough if you do it every 6 months. This is
No,
not
you
going
have
to
to keep
happen.
going.
You're going to start from scratch every single time. So
Yeah.
that's why, you've invested time in the class and time in the yarn and time in now perfecting this. I'm just going to tell you all again, turn around and do it again, because that's going to make the most difference. And that's why we do our 22 socks in the year. So we're going with the year 22. You can complete 22 socks. The only thing we ask is that you use our yarn, and then we're going to reward you with a skein at the end of the year, and they have to be sock weight. So the DK socks don't count, but
Oh, that's not fair. I
nah,
can't
well,
read that in there. I
yeah,
can't-
that's the
that
way it
not
is.
fair. Why
That's
are you doing that?
that
I
because
cannot see. I can
that's
absolutely cannot see that yarn because of my eyes.
yeah. Well, we'll you can knit the hats. We're doing 22 hats.
I'm gonna do 22. I'll do 2.
Okay. Leslie, did you have a question?
Yeah, a couple questions. Okay. First of all, when I'm doing this sock, thinking towards making the second sock, do you advise like counting the rows all the way up, or does it have to be as precise? In other words, like if I'm measuring 6.5 inches on my second sock, do I need to count all the rows going up or keep track of all the rows on the first sock? Because I have been doing that. I have like one of those little stitch counter things, and I just keep track, because obviously counting them is really tiny or whatever going on.
Well, that's kind of personal preference. I'm simply a measurer. Inches is my jam. Centimeters is my jam. I don't want that extra work. But if you like that, you can be more precise that way. But I think the more you knit, the more you can just take your measure. And that's what's also nice about the sock ruler too. Didn't any of you watch that sock ruler YouTube? Okay, that's on there so that you can see how we use the sock ruler. Yeah, very good.
Okay.
Vanessa, did you
All
have
right.
a question?
Question 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Like there are obviously a bazillion different sock patterns out there. Does this translate pretty well? Like, let's say you want to do kind of a lacy cuff or whatever, and stick with that heel, because I really like that heel. Does that kind of translate, or do you have to kind of fudge a little bit to get, like I haven't really looked at a lot of different patterns,
Yeah.
but obviously some use size 2 needles, some 1s, some 0s. Gauges are different, yarn is different.
Yeah, you knit, once you know your numbers, once you know your sock needle, once you know that 64 works, and if you're knitting with fingering weight yarn, then regardless of what the pattern says, I knit what works for me. Okay, so now some patterns with the Fair Isle or the stranded knitting. So I think I showed you my heart socks last week. When I knit this, I did the cuff in a 0, and then the row before the hearts, I switched to a 1. I did the 5 rows of hearts on a 1. I did the row afterward, then back onto my 0, and the rest of the sock is done in the 0. So the only time I change my needles are when I'm doing stranded knitting, because stranded knitting can get really tight to pull up and on your foot. And we do some knit alongs with that, and we'll give you some tips on that. And next week is when we have Sock Talk. And that's when we come on and showed all the different patterns. And I'd encourage you all to come back next Tuesday at 6, because you'll see all of our sock knitters that are talking about that exact thing, how they do the pattern, what they might do, how they might change things. The one thing that sometimes if you're doing a pattern on the front of a sock, see it's plain on the back, front, sometimes I may flip a couple stitches forward. So instead of 32, I might have 34 and 36 because of the pattern dictating it on the front. What you need to remember, and I'm speaking from personal experience, is you've got to flip those stitches back when you're ready to do the heel. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Trust me, I've done it with 36 on the front and ended up with 28 on the back, and then that messes up your heel. And so you end up getting going and going along here, and you're doing your great pattern and it's super fun, but don't forget to flip those stitches back around. Does that make sense? Because you got to be even to make that work. Vanessa, you got your hand up. Do you have a question? There she is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So I sorry. I
That's all right.
completed the heel, but I think I did something kind of weird. I'm gonna turn on my camera.
Yeah.
I ended up with this little like hole. Oh gosh.
Okay.
I
Let's
ended
see.
up with this little like hole here. And that's like, this is my heel. And then I think what happened, maybe I just need help troubleshooting it, but like,
Yeah.
that's where it goes. And then it's like right
Yeah.
at that corner right there. And I think I know what caused it, but I don't want to do it again. And I think I just kept going back and forth instead of going back into the round. But
Oh.
is that what you think could have
That
happened?
very well could have happened, Vanessa.
Okay.
It's not uncommon. I'm glad you brought that up. It's not uncommon for us to sometimes, this is a little darker, to have those little holes, especially when you add a sock of a heel of a different color, because getting that cinched up is hard. And so, a lot of folks, I know you want to not have it happen, but sometimes it happens. And you know what I do? I just whip it shut. When I'm weaving in the end, I just whip it shut. And I am doing a new technique right now where I'm going down and picking up a stitch down below that, putting it on the needle and knitting it together. I'm not quite ready to teach that yet because I want to make sure it works. But Arne and Carlos, who we like and follow their knitting, they teach that. And so that might be an option as well. But I think you're right. You probably just didn't maybe get it cinched up or when you started to go in the round. And that's, I mean, this is your first time. That's pretty good.
Thank you.
Your heel looks great.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure that I kind of identified it correctly and I wasn't going to do it again. I was like, I don't think anyone really wants socks with holes in the ankle part, but yeah.
No.
Okay.
But it is kind of a thing of a sock knitter. Sock knitters, I have people come in and say, I've got holes. And then sometimes I knit and I don't have any holes. So,
Okay.
again, there's a lot of factors that sometimes play into it. I get them a little bit more again when I'm using a new color. So, but I think they look great. Congratulations. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk a little bit and then we'll answer any other questions you have. I've gotten this sock ready to do my toe. So a couple things we talked about. I have, these we talked about the little rubber bands that I put on the end, especially when I'm doing my toe. I like a marker on the side. I have my clip that's up here. And we talked last week, I'll just show it again. The nice thing about a magic loop is you can move those needles off and that way you can try it on. Did any of you try your socks on?
Yes.
Okay, good. And did you try them on at this point and see that it got to the base of your big toe? Okay,
Not yet.
That would be something to check. I'm going to show you one more time how that sock ruler works. So now that I'm at my spot, I would tuck the sock ruler in to the sock like this, turn it around, and it needs to be 7.5 for me. So my foot, if I put my foot on here, it goes to 9.5 is what, if I stood on it. You remember when you used to go get your shoes and you'd stand on the little measure thing? Yes. Okay. And maybe they still do that. So my toe comes to 9.5. You take a 1/2 inch off, and then you take another 1.5 inch allowance for the toe that you're going to put on. So I can tuck this in and I can measure and say, I'm at 7.5. And I know that I'm at 7.5 from the heel. I also know that my number is 5.5 from my heel to where I would start my toe. So yours might be 4, yours might be 4 7/8. I don't know what your number would be, but it's important to know what that number is. I was sorting socks the other day. I have one sock that's the right length, and I have another sock that's like an inch short. And I know I didn't measure very well. So, once you get your numbers, I'm going to show you a one and done sock here when we're done. That shows you how you can knit a whole tube and have 2 socks. Okay, are you up for that? Justin, how did your socks go this week?
Good. I was a little concerned about the gauge because when I tried a sweater previously, it came out to be way too big. But I was surprised because my gauge ended up being 8.5 for the inch toe. Yeah.
Great. You felt good with it then, huh?
Yep.
Great. Well, for all of you that have had that happen with sweaters, you got to take our sweater class because Susan is just a master at helping with the 2 big sweaters. Okay, we're going to go to screen share and we're going to go to the desktop and we'll go to YouTube. Hopefully this will be a little louder for you.
Please.
Let's see it. There we go. Go ahead and mute yourself. I've determined my correct fit for my foot, and now I'm ready to do the decreases for the toe. I always like to add a different color, and if I'm adding a different color, I knit 1 plain round. If you were just going on with your yarn, you just move right into it, but I knit 1 plain round of the new color before I start to decrease. You're going to have these ends. I don't tuck them into my sock quite yet. And remember, It's just tug and snug, not tug and tight. And you'll kind of tighten them up as you're gone. So I've done my one round and now I'm ready to do my first decrease round. You're going to decrease on this side of the needle and on this side of the end of this needle. Then you're going to turn and you'll do a decrease here and a decrease here for a total of 4 stitches. So it's a simple, straightforward decrease. It's knit 1 and SSK. SSK is slip 1 as if to knit. So you enter it as if you're knitting, slip it again, and that turns the stitch. And then you knit those 2 together. I insert my front needle in the 2 stitches and my yarn's waiting for me. I wrap it really, knitting it through the back loop, so to speak. And SSK will make it lean to the left. Then you will knit across and you'll knit to the last 3 stitches. And this decrease is a knit 2 together. And that will make it lean to the right. And that is kind of important as we're doing our socks because we're creating really that toe box that you do want to lean those ways. So coming upon here, whoop, to the last 3 stitches, okay? Then we will knit 2 together and knit 1. And so what's really nice about this decrease is you've got that plain stitch before your decrease stitch, and that will make that, sometimes it's hard to get into the 2, make sure you're catching both of those stitches, knit those 2 together, snug it up, knit, and then you're going to turn as you've been doing for your magic loop. That would be the decrease stitch after, not before. And you'll come across and you will do the same thing here. This one will be an SSK. This one will be a knit 2 together. And then there's a plain round. And then you'll repeat these last 2 rounds, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, depending on your size. And then you'll move into a decrease round every time until you've got your stitches down to 24 stitches. And 24 stitches means 12 on this side and 12 on this side. So sometimes I've seen folks just finish to 24. That's not a small enough toe. You've got to get it to 12 and 12.
What if you
Okay. That's the problem with YouTube is all these commercials. All right. So what I said at the very end is very important. It's 24 total stitches. So that's sometimes how the pattern reads, but it is 12 on each side. So I've had people come in and their toe is this wide because they've got 24 here and 24 here. It's 12 and that's for a 64. Some of you are 14. Some of you are 10. Okay. Depending on how many you would have cast on. Okay. So that's how you do your decreases for your toes. There's lots of different ways to do it, but it gives you a nice little edge. And we'll see that as we move on into these next. So let's look at the rounded Kitchener. Our sock is complete. And so it's time to finish off our toe with the Kitchener stitch. I like to do the rounded Kitchener, which I'll demonstrate. I also prefer this smaller darning needle that has the bent tip. Many of you might have a darning needle like this, but you can see how large that is. With sock yarn fingering weight, it just makes it really cumbersome to do. So for the rounded Kitchener, you will work the first 2 stitches together and then 1 stitch. So it's 3 stitches on the front, 3 stitches on the back. I like to hold my needles. I've got them lined up. I've got the yarn coming from the back needle. And I put my index finger in between, just the tip of it to kind of give it a little space. and you're going to enter the first 2 stitches as if to knit, slip them off, enter the 3rd stitch or 2nd stitch as if to purl, leave on, pull your yarn through, and then you'll go to the back and make sure you come under the needles. You'll enter the first 2 stitches as if to purl, purl off, enter the 3rd or 2nd stitch as if to knit, leave on, and then pull and tug up. Remember, snug, not tight. Then we'll go back to just a regular Kitchener, which is knit off, pivot and purl on. Do it in the back, it's purl off, knit on. And what I like to do is I knit off and then I just pivot. So you don't pull the yarn through that first stitch, you just pivot and do the purl on, and then you pull it. Just so you've got one motion, purl off, knit on. And again, you're going to kind of look and make sure you're creating the stitch, and you'll work across your needle until you have 3 stitches on the other end. So bear with me, we'll get to that spot. And again, it's not, you don't really tug it to kill it, you just snug it. That'll be my motto. Don't tug, just snug, okay? We're working there. Off, purl on, and off, purl on. Now, I have a little bit of a predicament here. Not sure how I got off. Probably. I do know how it got off because I didn't flip those stitches around that we talked about. So this is a perfect example of what I was telling you about. So you're going to see how you get to fix it. Probably got off because of how I moved some stitches around. So what's super important is that you redistribute your stitches so you have an even amount on the front and an even amount on the back, which I did not check. So I'm going to work these stitches in. This will be a good opportunity to show this. We'll knit off, purl on. In the back, I'm going to purl off 2 and knit off 1. So I'm going to kind of absorb those stitches a bit. All right, so now I've got 3 and 4. So I'm ready to finish the rounded Kitchener. And again, this time I'm going to work the first stitch and these 2 stitches will be done together. So knit off and purl on. And this time I'm going to slip that front needle out. Now, technically I would do the first stitch and the second 2, but because I've got the extra ones, I'm going to go ahead and purl off 2, knit off 2, and be done. And then we'll give it a look and see what we think of our toe. So, you know, this is a little bit off here because of my uneven stitches. You can see nicely how a Kitchener stitch simply rolls the knit stitch on and over. I'm not going to fuss this. I could have pulled it out and got it all even and fine, but you know what? It's going to be on my toe. It's going to be on my foot. It might be in my shoe. It's going to be all right. I'm gonna roll with it and let it be. And then we're going to weave in these ends, which I'll show in another video. Okay. This is that sock actually. And you can just see that there's just a little bit of extra fabric up there, but you know what? you can't really see it. So I'm glad that I just left it. This is what a rounded Kitchener looks like. And I picked up the rounded Kitchener from Susan B. Anderson. And I really, really like the rounded Kitchener because it just, sometimes these toes look a little more squared up. This makes this look, especially if you look at it from the side, it makes it look more like accustomed to what we would think of a sock with a rounded toe. Now on your instructions that you got, these are the needles. And so that there's really a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what's really super important is what I talked about. If you don't have these, the little Chobani thin darning needles. And in fact, I don't ever use that the old fat darning needle anymore because these are so nice. You can't begin to weave your socks in with this fat. It's just too fat for the yarn. So we have these at the shop. They come in 3 different sizes within the little tube. They're like $7. So, you know, you've done a lot of work on the sock, and Kitchener isn't always the easiest thing for a lot of folks. So, you know, correct tools and right tools will make the difference. All right, let's talk about weaving in the ends. Now, as you look at the YouTube channel, we've got our beginning sock playlist, and you'll see that here's the check gauge that I talked about. I filmed this afternoon. And here are these 3 videos that I just showed you so that you can go watch them there. Down here is where the short row tutorials are. So here's the beginning socks. And then right here are the 3 videos that we're watching. So we'll watch our weaving in ends to finish. Okay, it's time to finish our sock by weaving in our ends. And so this is where we finished our Kitchener stitch. And you can see that it looks a little dog-eared. And so when I get ready to weave it in, I'm always going to kind of take my yarn and I'm going to look at how can I make that absorb into my sock. You know, you could go that way, but I like it more this way. I like to use the John James Sharps so that I can split some yarn. When you thread a needle, you want to put your yarn over the needle, pinch your index and thumb together, pull it out, don't peek, and then it will, no, most of the time, pull it out. I think I peeked, and that's the problem. And then you just insert your eye of your needle in. And that will thread the needle. Okay, and then I'll pull this in going this way. But one other thing you want to do is kind of give it a look and say, how do my heels look? I've got a little bit of a hole here, so I'm going to have to fix that up. This guy looks really good. What I like to do, I look at that beforehand, and now I'm ready. I'm going to put my hand in the sock, and I'm going to insert it really kind of close up right here, pull it in, and you can see how that disappears so nicely. And then I'm going to turn the whole sock inside out. You might take your hand out because you've got that needle in there, and I'll undo the needle, but I'm going to turn the whole, I like to work my ends in kind of all at once. So I turn it in so that I can see where things are. And I'm going to look here to see which side of my heel. This guy's got the little bit. This guy's got the bigger hole, and I'll show you how I weave in that. But let's go up to the top here, and we'll thread the needle again. And with 100% wool, this has got a little nylon in it. When I said about peeking, it means when you're pinching your fingers together, don't open them a little bit. If you'll pinch them together and put the eye of the needle down between your fingers, it'll thread nearly every time. It's when you open it a little bit to look, and then it opens up the yarn and it makes it hard to thread. So that's what I mean by peeking.
But I like to, and you don't want to pull this too tight because it will pucker that, but I like to take little snippets of the yarn, not the whole stitch, because you don't want to get to the other side, about 1/2 inch, pull my needle through. And then I'm going to give it a little tug back, and then I'm going to come back to this side, and I'm going to come back through, kind of catching that yarn that I just wove down those stitches, kind of splitting the difference, give it a tug back, and then I like to snug it that way, and then I would snip it off. I like to snip mine pretty close, okay? Now, that's pretty self-explanatory, but let's go down to our little hole that we see here. Sometimes it's just, we just have holes, and we do our best not to, but again, I can cinch them up. The one thing you want to be careful of is that you don't go too deep so that you sew your sock together. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to come over. I'm going to just kind of stay on the top of that, and I'm going to split the difference of those yarns, and I'm going to come through it and just again snug, not tug, through it. And I'm going to go back almost like I'm whipping a stitch, just so that it really secures that. If you're in doubt, a good thing to do would then to be turn it around and check it to make sure that you have a good look. I'm pretty confident with this one. And now I'm going to weave in this in, and I'm going to go up the blue line right here, picking up little snippets, little snippets, little snippets. And then I'm going to come right back down. And I'm going to go in that yarn. I'll maybe pick up a little underneath. And it'll feel a little tight. You pull it through. Give it a snug. Sometimes I pull it back, give it a snug, flip it off, and let's go look at it and see what we think of that look. This side. Ah, it's fabulous. I mean, you really can't tell that there was a hole there. So we get kind of worried about these, but there's really no reason to sweat that. All right, then you'd finish weaving in the rest and enjoy wearing your socks.
Okay, there we go. Let's stop our share. So there we go, Vanessa. I didn't even plan that, and got to show you how I fixed that. I forgotten that I had that to fix that heel for you. So questions you have about what we just looked at? Anybody have any questions? Pat? Yeah. Got come off mute. There you go.
Okay. How long is your toe? I'm concerned on where to start the decreases. I think I'm right, but I'm not.
Well, this too is something we discover, you know, to figure out. It's about an inch and a half.
Okay.
So it's a little smaller toe than we would have knit on our other socks, Pat.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, some of you might have, I have some customers that have a long toes or maybe even one long toe. And so that you might have to adjust your, you might have to do some more plain rounds before you would do a decrease round.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Again,
Yeah.
you know, and the thing about a toe is if it doesn't fit, and you'll know it when you put it on, you'll feel that, you know, it just feels too short. And you'll know that when you put it on. And that's not that much to take out.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
true.
you could take that back out and pick up the stitches and do it. But again, this is just one of those fit where you do adjust size. So this is the thing that a lot of folks, they think that in order to make my toe fit, I have to add more to the toe. Where do you think you might need to add more to make your toe fit?
Well, I suppose underneath that length underneath.
The foot. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. So that this just remains the same.
Mhm.
And like in my old socks, Pat, this foot was 4.5.
Mhm.
But because this heel fits differently and the toe's different, I have to go to 5.5.
Okay. Well, that's kind of what I just went to. I think I'm a little smaller foot, but I think it'll work.
Okay. All right. Good.
Thank you.
Good, good, good. You bet. Other questions?
Do they shrink at all?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. And let's talk about care. I wash mine in the washing machine. I turn them inside out. I do not throw them in with a pair of jeans, other clothes. I wash them alone, not just one pair, but I wash my hand knit socks together. You can get like a lingerie bag or one of those mesh bags, and that keeps them from getting beat up. But turning them inside out really does make a difference. And with hand dyed yarn, you always are going to run the risk that you might have a color bleed. Okay. They do their best to get colors washed out, but that's why you don't really want to throw your socks in with a white shirt. Okay. It just doesn't happen very often. Jessica does a really good job, but I don't care if it's Jessica's or anyone's hand dyed yarn. They don't have the facilities to process the rinsing of water that a large manufacturer of, you know, commercial kind of yarn would have the ability to do. So, you know, we need a lot of red in Nebraska. So red especially has a bit of a color bleed, can have a color bleed. So until I've washed them once or twice, I don't ever even throw those socks in with other colors of socks. Okay. So that's how I care for my socks. I lay them flat to dry there. I don't throw them in the washing machine. We do have sock blockers. You can put them on the sock blockers if you want to as well. But I find just laying them flat and kind of reshaping them, they hold their shape great. If anything, they might get a little bit stretched out, but not much, but you know, they get a little relaxed. That's what I'm going to say, a little relaxed. And when I wash them up, they're just right back to where I need them to be. Other questions? Yes.
So you mentioned that there's a handout. Did I miss an email?
You know, Nancy, yes, there is a handout. I will go check. It seems to me that I did see your name as we might have typed the email wrong. So let me go check it and get it right out to you. Okay.
Okay. I looked underneath where all the other downloads were thinking might be there, but it wasn't. So
Yeah. Okay. We'll get it
Okay.
to you. Thank you for checking. You bet. Let's talk a little bit about one and done. This is a one and done sock. Okay. So this is the old method where we would put a waste yarn in. But once you know your numbers, once you know that you like a cuff that's 6.5 or 4 or whatever it is, or the leg, when I say cuff, I'm referring to the whole thing. Once you know that, then you would work it. Now, where this pink yarn is, you would knit the heel. So you would do the heel. Then you come down. I know my number is 5.5, and that fits me. If I'm on gauge, everything's good. 5.5. And then this is I picked it up actually. This shows, I just haven't taken them apart. I knit these a long time ago. I haven't taken them apart because it's just a good opportunity to show. But maybe I will, because then I could have 2 done socks. What the heck? But then you have to come around and you pick up and then you remove this waste yarn. There actually is a way that you could cut them apart. You really can just cut them apart and go. But you would want to put the stitches up on a needle. Then you would knit 5.5. You'd put the heel in. Make sure to put it on the right side. Don't put it on the other side. This one has a pattern. And then you'd finish your cuff. And then there is a loose bind off. And when I send you the video tomorrow, I will send you the one and done pattern. Okay. And it has the loose bind off. It's kind of like a sewn bind off, but you've got to do a loose bind off because you've got to have enough stretch. Because if you would bind off like you'd normally bind off on knitting, it would be too tight and you would not be able to get it on. So that's our one and done sock. And I like to do it that way, because once you get it cast on, you just keep going. Some people knit 2 socks at a time like this. Some people knit them on a 40-inch magic loop. And then you've got 1 sock going here and 1 sock going here. The thing about that is you've got two skeins of yarn. And then you have to make sure that you turn those skeins of yarn as you're turning your sock. Okay. So, I haven't timed it, but I would almost go to bat that this is as quick as taking all the time to turn those yarns all the time. If you're doing 2 at a time, and 2 different and a different colored heel, then you've got 4 balls of yarn that you're managing, the yarn management. So it can be done. There are people that do it. I have other folks that will knit 2 at a time on different needles. So they have 1 on this needle and 1 on this needle, and they're knitting the same sock, and they just knit the little cuff, and they knit the cuff over here, and then they knit 3 inches here and they knit 3 inches here. There is such a thing called second sock syndrome. So that I'm going to say that I have that a lot. Because the new yarn comes out and then I want to make the new yarn. And so one of the things that I'm doing this year is I'm knitting my 2 socks for the month, and then I'm knitting 1 from last year so I can catch it up so that I can get it done. And Joanne, you're smiling. Have you experienced, you're a relatively new sock knitter, aren't you? And have you
constantly. That's why I keep buying more needles, because I want to see what the yarn looks like. So I think I won't ever have a pair anymore eventually.
I know. And when you become a sock enthusiast, is what I call you, you'll end up with a lot of sock needles too. I mean, you'll end up with a few 0s or 1s or whatever you end up knitting your socks with. But again, don't sweat that. You'll get them done when you get them done. And I actually have done that. I have gone back and finished them up. So next week, Joanne.
I have a quick question. I've been at like some other sock patterns, and a lot of them don't use the magic loop. Can you translate those patterns to use the magic loop?
Absolutely.
So like if it says they use 3 or 4 needles, that can still be a magic loop one you do?
That's right. If they're saying 3 or 4 needles, they're talking about double point needles. So magic loop is a replacement for double points.
Okay, so you would just divide the stitches between the 2.
Mm-hmm.
There's a pattern I saw though that's like 63, and they're dividing between 3 needles. How would you do that one?
I just split it at 32 and 31, or 32 and 31.
Would you? Okay.
Now, if there are patterns in your pieces, so like patterns in here, you could put markers in to designate, like, if it's an 8-stitch pattern and you've got it on, maybe you've got 40 on one needle and 20 on the other, just put markers in there so that you can divide those. You don't even have to knit them evenly. You can divide them. You can divide them however you want to divide them.
Okay.
Except when it comes to the heel.
Right, right.
Yeah, except when it comes to the heel. All good things. Good observations. You'll get this. I promise you. You'll feel really much more comfortable looking at patterns and saying I could adapt that. I could make that work. So good questions. Holly, how did your week go? We haven't heard from you.
I went away for a 3-day rug hooking event, so I had to punch and hook. So
Okay. All right.
So I did this. It's called a Van Gogh.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Well, I kind of did that. So I'm also going to come by the store. I think I'm going to do 2 needle and I'm going to do 3 cuffs and 3 socks all in a row.
Right.
I decided.
Great.
Yeah.
Yep, that's all right. And we talked about that maybe last week about go ahead and get your socks to a certain point and then do your heels all at once. I had a gal last year that's how she mastered her socks, is she did, or how she mastered the heel portion. She did 3-4 heels right in a row. And then you really get comfortable with it. No doubt. No doubt. Okay, anything else? Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So is there an advantage to doing the twin stitches versus doing something like German short rows or wrap and turn?
Not necessarily. It's just kind of what you find yourself to be more comfortable with. I kind of like the density of this. I like a German short row too. I like a German short row where you wrap it over. This little short row really has kind of taken the sock. About a year and a half ago, it kind of took the sock world by storm, so you certainly can do, there are a lot. I mean, if there's one way, there's 100 ways to knit a heel kind of thing. So I encourage you to try the other ones. Once you kind of get used to this and how it all works, try some of those, see what you think. Some of you might try it. We've done where we do a heel flap too. We try to do 1 heel flap a year because some people like the heel flap, and that would work. So you bet.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, well, it's been my pleasure to spend these last 2 Tuesdays with you. I think we are welcoming you to the sock world. And again, if you're not busy next Tuesday, jump on. We look at patterns. And so that's a good opportunity for us to we talk about that. Well, how would this work? And those things. So we'll be looking at different patterns that then you could make. And that kind of opens up a whole new enthusiasm for things. But I will tell you that I told staff this week, I said, I always need a vanilla pair. And when I said vanilla last week, I think Anne, you asked me, what does vanilla mean? And vanilla simply means you go round and round and round and round and round. So like with this one, I have to stop and think. And sometimes I just need to go round and round and round because that, I'm tired or I got something going on. And so just a round and around and around sock. So I said, I always have to have one of those going. And that's probably why I get those socks done. That's probably why this one is still waiting for its mate, because it has more. It has more to do, but I promise I'm going to make a commitment right here. I'm going to say that I'm going to have that done at least by the end of this month, maybe by next Tuesday. Okay. Because I've been putting that off. If you saw, I knitted in the summer, so it needs to be done. All right. Thank you much. Let me know if I can help in any way. Stop in. We're here to help you, and we'll get this going. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'll send you the video.